Have you ever woken up and felt like nothing matters? Like you're going through the motions of life, but there's no real purpose behind any of it? You're not alone, and you're not broken. This feeling of meaninglessness, this existential emptiness that seems to swallow everything you once cared about, is something that even the greatest minds in history have faced. Leo Tolstoy, one of the most celebrated writers who ever lived, reached a point where despite having everything, wealth, fame, a loving family, literary success, he wanted to end his life because it all felt utterly meaningless. But here's what's extraordinary about Tolstoy's story. He didn't just survive this crisis. He discovered something that completely transformed his understanding of what makes life worth living. And what he found isn't some complex philosophical theory or religious doctrine. It's something so simple, yet so profound that it can change everything for you too, right now, today. Imagine if the very thing that's making your life feel empty, that sense that nothing you do matters, could actually become the doorway to the most meaningful existence you've ever experienced. What if the meaninglessness you're feeling isn't a curse but a signal, not a dead end, but a beginning? That's exactly what Tolstoy discovered. And by the end of this video, you'll understand how to apply his revelation to your own life. Most people think that meaning comes from achievement, from getting somewhere, from becoming someone important. They believe that once they reach a certain level of success, once they have enough money, enough recognition, enough love, then life will finally feel meaningful. But Tolstoy had all of these things, and still he found himself staring into an abyss of meaninglessness, so deep that he contemplated suicide. He wrote, "I could not attach a rational meaning to any single act in my entire life. The only thing that surprised me was how I had failed to realize this from the very beginning." This is the trap that catches so many of us. We spend our lives climbing ladders only to discover they're leaning against the wrong wall. We chase external validation, material success, social status, thinking these will fill the void inside us. But Tolstoy learned something crucial. The more he achieved externally, the more meaningless everything became internally. This isn't because achievement is bad. It's because we're looking for meaning in the wrong place entirely. The crisis began when Tolstoy started asking the fundamental questions that most of us avoid. Why am I here? What's the point of all this effort? What happens when I die and none of this matters anymore? He had written War and Peace and Anna Karenina, novels that would outlive him by centuries. Yet even this immortal legacy felt hollow to him. He realized that all human endeavors, no matter how grand, eventually crumble to dust. Civilizations rise and fall. Great works are forgotten. Even the sun will eventually burn out. So what's the point of anything? This is where most people either distract themselves with busyness or fall into despair. But Tolstoy did neither. Instead, he made a decision that would change everything. He stopped looking outward for meaning and started looking inward. He stopped asking, "What can I achieve?" and started asking, "What can I give?" He stopped focusing on what he could get from life and started focusing on what he could contribute to life. And this is where his first great insight emerges. Meaning isn't something you find, it's something you create. It's not a destination you arrive at. It's a way of being you embody. Tolstoy realized that he had been treating life like a problem to be solved, when actually life is an opportunity to be embraced. The meaninglessness he felt wasn't because life inherently lacks meaning. It was because he was waiting for meaning to be handed to him, instead of taking responsibility for creating it himself. But how do you create meaning when everything feels pointless? This is where Tolstoy's second insight becomes crucial. He discovered that meaning emerges not from what you do for yourself, but from what you do for others. Not from what you can accumulate, but from what you can contribute. Not from how you can be served, but from how you can serve. This wasn't just philosophical speculation for Tolstoy. He lived it. He gave away his wealth, worked in the fields alongside peasants, taught children, and dedicated his later years to serving those who had less than him. And something miraculous happened. The more he gave of himself, the more meaningful his life became. The more he served others, the more alive he felt. The more he focused on love rather than achievement, on connection rather than success, on contribution rather than accumulation, the more his life overflowed with purpose and joy. This is the paradox that most people never discover. You find your life by losing it in service to something greater than yourself. But let's be practical here, because you might be thinking, that's beautiful, but I have bills to pay, responsibilities. I can't just give everything away and go live in a commune. And you're right. Tolstoy's external circumstances were unique to him. But the principle he discovered is universal and can be applied no matter what your situation is. You don't need to abandon your career or give away your possessions to find meaning. You need to shift your focus from getting to giving, from achieving to contributing, from success to service. Think about the moments in your life when you felt most alive, most purposeful, most connected. I bet they weren't moments when you received something, but moments when you gave something. Maybe it was helping a friend through a difficult time. Maybe it was creating something that touched someone else's heart. Maybe it was standing up for someone who couldn't stand up for themselves. These moments felt meaningful because they connected you to something larger than your own immediate needs and desires. This is what Tolstoy meant when he wrote, "The sole meaning of life is to serve humanity." But serving humanity doesn't mean you have to become Mother Teresa or dedicate your life to charity, though those are beautiful paths. It means approaching your daily life with the question, how can what I'm doing right now contribute to the well-being of others? It means being present with your family, not because you have to, but because your presence is a gift you're giving them. It means doing your work, not just for the paycheck, but because your work, however small it might seem, contributes to the functioning of society. It means treating every interaction as an opportunity to bring a little more light into the world. When you start living this way, when you start seeing yourself not as someone who needs to get something from life, but as someone who has something to give to life, everything changes. Suddenly, your job isn't just a job, it's a way of serving. Your relationships aren't just about what you can get from others, they're about what you can give to others. Your challenges aren't just obstacles to overcome, they're opportunities to develop the strength and wisdom you can then share with others. But here comes the hard part, and this is where Tolstoy's third insight becomes essential. Living meaningfully requires you to accept suffering as part of the human condition. Tolstoy realized that much of his meaninglessness came from his resistance to the inevitable difficulties of life. He had been trying to create a life without pain, without struggle, without loss. But such a life doesn't exist, and the pursuit of it only leads to more suffering. Instead of running from suffering, Tolstoy learned to find meaning in it. He understood that suffering, when approached with the right mindset, becomes a teacher. It develops compassion, it builds character, it connects you to the universal human experience. Every person who has ever lived has faced pain, loss, disappointment, fear. When you stop trying to escape these experiences and instead ask, what can this teach me? How can this help me serve others better? You transform suffering from meaningless pain into meaningful growth. This doesn't mean you should seek out suffering or that all pain is good. It means that when suffering inevitably comes, as it comes to everyone, you have a choice. You can let it make you bitter, closed, and self-focused, or you can let it make you wise, compassionate, and other-focused. Tolstoy chose the latter, and this choice transformed his relationship with every difficult experience in his life. Think about the people who have had the most positive impact on your life. I bet many of them were people who had suffered significantly, but had used their suffering to develop wisdom and compassion. They didn't let their pain make them smaller. They let it make them larger. They didn't let their struggles isolate them. They let their struggles connect them more deeply to others who are also struggling. This is how suffering becomes meaningful, when it becomes a bridge to understanding and serving others, rather than a wall that separates you from them. Now, you might be wondering, this all sounds good in theory, but how do I actually implement this when I'm struggling to get out of bed in the morning? How do I find meaning when everything in my life feels gray and empty? This is where Tolstoy's fourth insight becomes crucial. Meaning is built through small daily actions, not grand gestures. You don't need to revolutionize your entire life overnight. You need to start making small choices that align with the principle of service and contribution. Start with this simple question each morning. What's one small thing I can do today to make someone else's life a little better? Maybe it's sending a text to someone who's been on your mind. Maybe it's doing your work with extra care and attention. Maybe it's listening to a friend without trying to fix their problems. Maybe it's picking up litter in your neighborhood. These actions might seem insignificant, but they're not. They're the building blocks of a meaningful life. Tolstoy discovered that meaning accumulates. Each act of service, no matter how small, adds to your sense of purpose. Each moment when you choose to give rather than get, to contribute rather than consume, to love rather than judge, you're creating meaning. And slowly, gradually, these moments start to outweigh the moments of emptiness until meaningfulness becomes your dominant experience rather than meaninglessness. But here's what's crucial to understand. This process requires faith. Not necessarily religious faith, though that can be part of it, but faith that your actions matter, even when you can't see immediate results. Faith that love and service are worthwhile, even when they're not recognized or rewarded. Faith that there's something sacred about the human experience, even when it feels mundane or difficult. Tolstoy called this the leap of faith, the decision to act as if life is meaningful, even when you can't prove it is. He realized that meaning isn't something you discover through analysis or achieve through effort. It's something you create through choice. You choose to treat others with kindness, not because you can prove it matters, but because you decide it matters. You choose to do your best work, not because someone is watching, but because you decide excellence is worthwhile for its own sake. This brings us to Tolstoy's most profound insight, the one that can truly change everything for you. He discovered that the question isn't, what's the meaning of life? But what meaning am I giving to my life? Life doesn't come with inherent meaning stamped on it like a price tag. Life comes as raw material that you get to shape into something meaningful through your choices, your actions, your relationships, your service. This is both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because it means you can't wait for someone else to make your life meaningful. You have to take responsibility for creating meaning yourself. But liberating because it means you have the power to make your life as meaningful as you choose to make it, regardless of your circumstances, your past, your limitations, or your current situation. When Tolstoy embraced this responsibility, when he stopped waiting for life to provide meaning and started providing meaning to life, everything changed. Not his external circumstances. Those remained largely the same. What changed was his internal experience. What had felt empty became full. What had felt pointless became purposeful. What had felt like a burden became a gift. And this is available to you right now. You don't need to wait until you figure everything out, until you find your passion, until you discover your purpose. You can start creating meaning today by asking, how can I serve? How can I contribute? How can I love? And then acting on the answers you receive. But let me be honest with you, this path isn't always easy. When you start living for something greater than yourself, you'll face resistance, both internal and external. Internal resistance because your ego wants to be the center of the story, and choosing service means making others the center. External resistance because a world focused on getting doesn't always appreciate people focused on giving. Tolstoy faced criticism for his choices. People called him crazy for giving away his wealth. naive for trusting in the power of love, foolish for believing that ordinary people doing ordinary things with extraordinary love could change the world. But he had discovered something that his critics hadn't. That meaning comes not from what others think of your life, but from what you think of your life. And he thought of his life as an opportunity to serve, to love, to contribute. That was enough. This might be the most important thing you take from this video. You don't need anyone else's permission or approval to make your life meaningful. You don't need to wait for the perfect circumstances or the ideal opportunity. You can start right now, right where you are, with what you have, by choosing to see your life as a chance to give rather than get, to serve rather than be served, to love rather than be loved. The meaninglessness you've been feeling, that emptiness that seems so overwhelming, might actually be life's way of preparing you for something greater. It might be clearing out space in your heart and mind for a new way of being, a way that's centered not on what you can achieve for yourself, but on what you can contribute to others. It might be inviting you to join the ranks of people throughout history who have discovered that the secret to a meaningful life isn't getting what you want, it's giving what you have. Tolstoy spent the last 30 years of his life living this way, and those 30 years, according to him, were the most meaningful of his entire existence. Not because they were the most successful in conventional terms, but because they were the most loving, the most service-oriented, the most connected to something larger than himself. So I ask you now, what would your life look like if you stopped asking, "What can I get from this world?" and started asking, "What can I give to this world?" What would change if you stopped waiting for life to provide meaning and started providing meaning to life? What would be different if you approached each day not as something to get through, but as something to give through? The answers to these questions aren't philosophical abstractions. They're practical realities that you can start experiencing today. Choose one person in your life who could use some kindness and show them kindness. Choose one task that you usually do grudgingly and do it with love. Choose one moment today to really listen to someone instead of waiting for your turn to talk. These simple acts won't solve all your problems or answer all your questions, but they will start building the foundation of a meaningful life. Remember, Tolstoy's great discovery wasn't that life is inherently meaningful. It was that life becomes meaningful when you decide to make it so. When you choose love over indifference, service over selfishness, giving over getting, you're not just changing your experience of life, you're changing life itself. You're adding to the sum total of meaning in the world. And that, according to Tolstoy, is the highest calling any human being can answer. The feeling of meaninglessness that brought you to this video doesn't have to be permanent. It can be temporary, a transition phase between an old way of being that no longer serves you and a new way of being that will transform everything. Tolstoy proved that it's possible to go from despair to joy, from emptiness to fulfillment, from meaninglessness to purpose. Not through achieving more, but through giving more. Not through getting your life together, but through giving your life away. If this message resonates with you, if something in your heart is saying yes to this invitation to create meaning through service, then you're ready for the transformation that Tolstoy discovered. You're ready to stop being a victim of meaninglessness and start being a creator of meaning. You're ready to stop waiting for life to serve you and start serving life. The question isn't whether you're capable of this transformation. You are. The question isn't whether the world needs what you have to offer. It does. The question is simply this: are you ready to begin? Are you ready to take the leap of faith that Tolstoy took? Are you ready to discover that the life you've been searching for has been waiting inside you all along, not as something you need to find, but as something you need to give? Your meaningful life starts now, not when everything is perfect, not when you have all the answers, not when you feel ready. It starts with the next choice you make to love instead of judge, to serve instead of be served, to give instead of get. Make that choice and everything changes. This is Tolstoy's promise to you, and it's a promise he kept for himself. Now it's your turn to keep it for yourself. But here's what I want you to understand as we conclude this journey together. The transformation that Tolstoy experienced didn't happen overnight. There were days when the old meaninglessness crept back in, moments when he questioned whether his new path was just another illusion, times when the weight of existence felt overwhelming despite his commitment to service. This is normal, this is human, this is part of the process. The difference wasn't that he never felt meaningless again. It was that he had a new response to meaninglessness when it arose. Instead of spiraling into despair, he would ask, "Who can I serve today? How can I love today? What can I give today?" These questions became his anchor, his way back to meaning when meaning felt lost. They can become your anchor too. When the darkness comes, and it will come because it comes to everyone, you don't have to fight it or deny it or pretend it's not there. You can acknowledge it and then ask these questions and let the answers guide you back to light. Tolstoy also discovered that meaning multiplies when shared. The more he lived this way, the more he attracted others who wanted to live this way too. His example gave others permission to seek meaning through service rather than success. This is one of the beautiful paradoxes of meaningful living. The more you focus on giving rather than getting, the more you end up receiving. Not necessarily material rewards, though sometimes those come too, but something far more valuable, the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing your life matters, that your existence makes the world a little better, that you're part of something larger and more important than your own small concerns. And let me tell you something that might surprise you. This path that Tolstoy discovered, this choice to create meaning through service, it's not just good for your soul, it's good for your mind and body too. Modern research has confirmed what Tolstoy intuited. People who live with purpose, who engage in acts of service, who focus on contribution rather than consumption, are happier, healthier, and live longer than those who focus primarily on their own success and pleasure. Meaning isn't just spiritually fulfilling, it's literally life-giving. So as you leave this video and return to your daily life, carry with you this final insight from Tolstoy. You are not a cosmic accident wandering through a meaningless universe. You are a conscious being with the power to create meaning, to spread love, to reduce suffering, to increase joy. Your life, exactly as it is right now, with all its imperfections and limitations and struggles, is an opportunity to participate in something sacred. Don't waste that opportunity waiting for a better moment, a clearer purpose, a more perfect situation. The moment is now. The purpose is service. The situation is perfect because it's real. Write in the comments below one small act of service you commit to doing this week. Let's create a community of people who have chosen meaning over meaninglessness, service over selfishness, love over indifference. Together, we can prove that Tolstoy was right, that life becomes meaningful, not when we find the right answer, but when we become the right answer for someone else who is struggling, searching, hoping for a sign that life is worth living. Be that sign. Be that answer. Be that meaning.